But easier to sell that you have more money in your pocket than it is the government's now running the healthcare system.
We begin with team coverage tonight. Senior Capitol Hill producer Chad Pergram explains where things stand with funding the government as only he can. And Chief National Correspondent Ed Henry kicks things off by telling us why it was so important to get both these things passed before Christmas and what's next. Good evening, Ed.
That's right, Shannon. Good to see you. The key here is that passing this temporary budget does not just keep the government open. It paves the way for President Trump, as you suggested, to sign the tax cut into law. With a senior official telling us tonight, there's a likely chance that happens tomorrow. The way the tax package was written, signing it this year would mean that it triggered some automatic spending cuts next year. But this continuing resolution just passed through the House and Senate includes some waivers that enables the president to defer those cuts until 2019. The president also made clear he did not want a messy shutdown to overshadow what he calls the winning on taxes that he's been trumpeting, declaring today in a tweet, House Democrats want a shutdown for the holidays in order to distract from the very popular, just passed tax cuts. House Republicans don't let this happen. Pass the CR and keep our government open. That is what they did. And Democrats do seem to still be smarting from the president's victory. After Obama aide Dan Pfeiffer tweeted this triumphant photo of Mr. Trump with the Republican leaders in the Oval Office yesterday and said it should be used on front pages when the president is, quote, indicted, Obama official Ben Rhodes actually retweeted that with this comment that the photo should also be used, quote, alongside the obituaries for Ryan, McConnell, and Pence. Well, House Majority Whip Steve Scalise, who remember was shot and nearly killed by a Bernie Sanders supporter who was targeting Republicans, slammed Rhodes with this simple but savage comeback. You may want to reconsider your rhetoric. Meanwhile, House Democratic leader Nancy Pelosi went back to resisting the president's agenda, telling her colleagues vote no on this stopgap budget because it did not include a provision allowing the children of illegal immigrants to stay in America. While the president made clear he's not going to get bogged down on that now, he'll deal with that in January. He instead wants to talk about jobs.
I don't think in his heart that the president intended to hurt these people in the very cruel way that they are being hurt by the actions that are being taken.
We're bringing the entrepreneur back into this country. We're getting rid of all the knots and all the ties, and we're going to see, you're going to see what happens. And ultimately, what does it mean? It means jobs, 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 jobs.
And the president did not want a shutdown to be the focus when several big companies have handed out bonuses and raised their workers' wages in the wake of the tax cut. Remember, Democrats had predicted the tax cut would not trickle down to employees. Interesting, Democrats have now maneuvered themselves into a political situation where they're on record voting for higher taxes and don't seem so happy the last 24 hours about actually lower the fact that higher wages are going to employees. Not a good place for them heading into the midterm, Shannon.
But they sound really interested in campaigning on this. That's what they say. We're going to debate more of that coming up. Ed Henry live for us tonight. Thank you.
Good to see you.
All right, Congress bolting out of D.C. for the Christmas holiday, but not before kicking some of the really tough issues into next year. Chad Pergram has the breakdown from Capitol Hill for us tonight. All right, Chad, let's start this off by saying, how did they get things wrapped up so quickly?
Well, this was a big punt. That's the bottom line. January is now the new December. December was supposed to be this big month here on Capitol Hill. They certainly passed tax reform, but they had all these other big things to do, possibly dealing with DACA, addressing this domestic surveillance program, FISA, and keeping the government open, maybe some extra money for the military. That didn't happen. They just did the minimum. They kept the government open and sent everybody home. Christmas won here in Washington. You know, it's often said that this decision was made by the most powerful people in Washington. Not the members of Congress, but their spouses. It was the spouses who wanted their friends and family home to do all those honeydew projects, trim the tree, finish Christmas shopping. They did that, and so that means that it will be a very busy January. They weren't sure that they were going to be able to fund the government. There was a very testy House Republican conference meeting last night here at the Capitol. Just a few minutes after the big celebration at the White House on tax reform, there was one senior official who said to me, I'm surprised that we got this done. So what they have done is they have done the minimum. They have funded the government through January 19th. They've temporarily renewed this domestic surveillance program, which is very controversial, FISA 702. And that's it for now, Shannon.
We love that video and the fact that everybody in D.C. refers to that as the jailbreak as we watch everybody run out and run to their waiting
and
cars
it's also
and
the
run
sound
to
of
the
jet
airport.
fuel. Yes, they pump
exactly.
jet fuel through the building here, supposedly, and that gets people all ginned up to want to run to the airport when we have these big congressional recesses.
Yeah, but as they run, now you've talked about they kicked a lot of things into January. So when they come back, there's some really serious stuff and another tight deadline.
Right. They didn't work out a long-term deal on funding the government. They didn't work out a long-term deal on funding the military. They haven't addressed DACA. They have to figure these things out. And this is why John Cornyn, the Republican whip in the Senate, said to me just a couple of hours ago that this is maddening. He said, you know, it's like Groundhog Day. We do this over and over again. We have to go home and recharge our batteries. And when they come back in January, Shannon, the matrix in the Senate is going to be a little bit different. Remember, it's going to be 51 Republicans and 49 Democrats. 2 new senators coming in, Tina Smith of Minnesota, succeeding Al Franken, who is retiring, and also Doug Jones, the Democrat from Alabama.
Right, you are. All right, Chad, thank you so much for your round-the-clock coverage on Capitol Hill. We appreciate it.
Anytime, Shannon.
All right, with the government funding battle temporarily delayed, the Democrats are now taking aim at the $1.5 trillion tax cut, hoping it will be a political loser for the GOP. But as we mentioned, even some left-wing commentators are worried that the Democrats' harsh criticism may backfire. Dave Weigel from the Washington Post writing, quote, Democrats routed but united against the tax bill plan to make it the centerpiece of a midterm campaign, one that may play out in a growing economy where the worst predictions about the tax cuts fall flat. Joining me now to discuss Fox News politics editor and editor of The Halftime Report, Chris Steigerwald. Great to see you.
I'm glad to see Chad back out of the three-piece suit. I think he can. We know that the crisis has passed. We're away from DEFCON 1.
Exactly. We have backed down one threat level assessment, but he's still there on the Hill because it was a busy
you never know.
day.
Right. They may do a do-over.
Okay, so we're hearing from Democrats that they are thrilled to run on this bill, that even the Tax Policy Center, which leans to the left, have said 80% of people are getting a cut. 15% see nothing. 5%, they're going to have some increase, but it's mostly high earners in blue states with high property taxes. Okay, so with all that aside, the Dems say this is going to be a good thing for them to campaign on. Here's what House Minority Leader Nancy Pelosi says.
So you know the particulars of the bill, that it takes us deeply into debt. It does not produce growth. It is not a simplification. It is not for the middle class. So this is a welcome debate that we have. They said this is going to be a big campaign issue for them. We welcome that. We welcome.
I feel like I'm living in 2 different universes, because how can these 2 things be true? At least in the immediate future, we know there are issues 10 years down the road with these tax cuts and everything. But right now, what she's saying and what independent assessors are saying are 2 very different things.
Don't you? One of the most charming things about Washington is the only people who ever care about the deficit are the people who aren't in power.
Right.
They complain bitterly about deficit spending, and then as soon as they get in power, they say, "No, this is a good deficit.
This is a different kind.
We really love. This is a delicious deficit." Look. Campaigns are about more than one thing, and even within a single topic, you're talking to multiple audiences. So yes, for suburbanites, Republicans are going to be on a good ground. They're going to say, hey, look, guys, we cut taxes, we cut your employer's taxes, jobs have improved, things are going up. The place where Democrats can take their message, this message about income inequality, they can take it to the surprising places where Donald Trump did well in 2016. They can go to places like where I grew up. They can go to places in the upper Midwest. They can go to Appalachia and say, here's what happened. You voted for Donald Trump and the Republicans because they were going to drain the swamp and stick it to the man, but they are the man. And they helped out Wall Street and they helped out big business, and they didn't help you out. Because you and I both know that in most of the communities that have been left behind in the last 30 years, there ain't no tax cut that is going to make them do better. That's not what, there's no panacea, and certainly tax cuts aren't probably going to do that for them. So this is a message that you can take to those folks. But yeah, you can't take it to people in the suburbs who are going to say, this is great. It's an extra $3 grand.
Well, and that's the thing is, you know, the speaker keeps saying, look, just as soon as February, it's going to start showing up in your deductions and withholding out of your paycheck. So they feel confident that this is going to be something they do want to campaign on. I thought this was interesting, though. Richard Rubin, Wall Street Journal, points out, he says this is the gap. This is what he points to. In 2018, 80% of households will get tax cuts. But in our poll, Wall Street Journal poll, 17% of people think they're getting tax cuts. The Democrats always seem to win the messaging game.
Or the Republicans lose it.
Either way, yeah. Which either way matters in the midterms.
And either way matters a great deal. And let me connect these two dots. So you have shameful governance. The people of the United States take or have borrowed in their name $4.5 trillion or something every year. The inability of this government to deal with all of the basic things,
spending,
just to basically budget. Things that everybody can agree on, and then you have pressing issues about health insurance, you have pressing issues about immigration, pressing issues about national daggone security. And they're applauding themselves because they made it out before Christmas to kick the can another month. I promise you this, whatever they do about tax, or however people receive the taxes, and I think that generally speaking it will be a net positive for Republicans, if they look like nincompoops who cannot run the basic function of the government, if they're continuing to stagger from crisis to crisis, voters are going to hold that against them strongly.
Yeah, because they feel that every time we get to one of these cliffs, they're very aware that we're sitting here talking about it. Why can't people manage as we do our household finances?
Right.
Why are they like drunken sailors, no matter which party?
And that's what they,
wandering around D.C.
And they get paid to do it. They get paid to do it. These are the only people who would possibly think of holding a press conference and congratulating themselves for barely making the bare minimum. So they need to do better if they want more trust.
I love the word nincompoops, by the way. It is underutilized. And I thank you for bringing it. Yes.
Bringing in that back.
We're going to start the hashtag nincompoops. Great to see you, Chris.
You bet.
Thank you. All right. United Nations Ambassador Nikki Haley made it perfectly clear today. Countries voting for a UN resolution condemning the U.S. recognition of Jerusalem as Israel's capital will pay a price. General Jack Keane next on what that price might be. And Senator Rand Paul tweets, the Obama administration may have done something worse than Watergate. We spoke to Senator Paul about that tweet, his comments straight ahead. And the sex harassment scandal reaches a crescendo. We have the disturbing details on the latest allegations. Plus, a rare interview with the lead FBI investigator in the Las Vegas shooting. What in the world happened? Stick around with what he has to say. It is the kind of tough talk that makes doves shudder and hawks applaud. Our ambassador to the United Nations, Nikki Haley, blasting nations who voted against President Trump's decision to recognize Jerusalem as Israel's capital. Haley warning there will be a price to pay for standing in the way of American policy.
We will remember it when we are called upon to once again make the world's largest contribution to the United Nations. And we will remember it when so many countries come calling on us, as they so often do, to pay even more and to use our influence for their benefit.
The special session of the UN General Assembly passing a declaration to condemn the move, 128-9, with 35 abstentions. So what price will those nations actually pay? Let's talk about it with retired four-star general and Fox News senior strategic analyst Jack Keane. General, always great to have you with us.
Yeah, great to be here.
Okay, I want to start with this tweet from the former CIA director, John Brennan. He says this: the Trump administration threat to retaliate against nations that exercise sovereign right in UN to oppose U.S. position on Jerusalem is beyond outrageous. He adds this shows real Donald Trump expects blind loyalty and subservience from everyone, qualities usually found in a narcissistic, vengeful autocrat.
Well, I don't have any problem with Haley's comments in pushing back on this vote, certainly. And actually, there's 65 that did not participate in the vote. Not 35, but one way or another, because a whole bunch of them just never showed up. So I think that's a little surprising, because I thought it'd be more overwhelming than that.
Me too.
I think when it comes to foreign aid is U.S. national interest, and we have certain goals we're trying to achieve with that in these countries. I don't think, based on a vote that's symbolic in nature, has no authority, it doesn't bind anybody to anything, yes, we were snubbed. But I think we can have a thicker skin than that. We're the world's global power. We're number one in the world. And we got to stay focused on what foreign aid is trying to do. Now, I would hold some money back from the UN, because they're in desperate need of reform. Secretary General and President Trump sat there a few months ago, said they were going to do that, and I'd make the money we give them conditional on them moving towards that reform.
Cleaning up their act. I know that you think that there are much bigger issues at play in the Middle East right now, that there are other things that are really more pressing than this issue about whether we're going to recognize Jerusalem as the capital of Israel or not.
Yeah, I mean, the president made a bold move. I think, you know, we've had abject failure because the not recognizing Israel by three of his predecessors has produced absolutely nothing. And he tried to maybe achieve some abject truth and see if that works. But I want our audience to understand that today, among the Sunni Arabs, the Middle East peace process doesn't even rank in the top 3, where it always used to be number 1. It may not even be number 4. Why? Because they're dealing with Iranian aggression. Radical Islamic terrorism exists in just about every one of their countries. There are 2 major civil wars taking place in Syria and in Yemen that are catastrophic in terms of human beings. And the 4th thing is they have internal issues that they must address if they're going to move their civil societies forward. And then possibly is the Middle East peace process. And another thing, Shannon, Israel has never been closer to the Sunni Arabs than they are right now. And that is because of the Iranian threat.
What do we do about Iran now? I mean, this president is obviously taking a much different posture with them than the previous administration did. There's this certification issue coming up in January with respect to the nuclear deal. He's been pretty tough on that. His rhetoric has been much different with Iran than it was during the Obama administration. So where do we go to actually make progress on those fronts?
Well, first of all, I totally agree with the comprehensive review and the conclusion that the administration has drawn that Iran is absolutely the #1 strategic threat in the region to our national interests and those of our allies. But I don't see us doing anything about what Iran is doing. In other words, they already own Lebanon, but they're taking complete control of Syria, and we've done nothing to contain that control. They have now established a land bridge that we forecasted would happen from Iran through Iraq into Syria to Lebanon. They're going to use Syria to encroach on Jordan and Israel. And as that continues to accelerate, it could possibly lead to a conflict between Israel and Lebanon. I'd like to see us get much more involved in containing Iran with specific policies and not just a strategic overview that they're the #1 strategic enemy.
Well, and President Trump talked a lot during the campaign about wanting to not get any more involved in certain conflicts and things that were going on over there. And that was very popular with a lot of people who voted for him because they didn't want to see more entanglements. But do you think it's going to take that to some extent to disrupt things like that land bridge?
Well, certainly, I know they would have concern about major U.S. boots on the ground. I'm not suggesting anything like that. But I am talking about working with our Sunni Arabs who are very concerned about what's taking place, and as are the Israelis. The Israelis are already conducting strikes into southern Syria up against their border, where the Iranian proxies are encroaching on the Israeli border. This is just going to get worse. But Iran is a major, major issue in the Middle East, and the United States is the indispensable ally to the Sunni Arabs in trying to contain it.
Well, we have a vital role to play, and it is a difficult, delicate balance. Good to hear from folks like you with good counsel. Thank you, General. And Merry Christmas.
And Merry Christmas.
Good to see you.
To you and to our viewers.
Yeah, as well. All right, Scott Lloyd, who heads the Office of Refugee Resettlement at the Department of Health and Human Services, catching some heat for tonight for a memo that says abortion and rape are both forms of violence. Lloyd arguing that allowing abortions after cases of assault implies that it's possible to, quote, cure violence with more violence. Lloyd writing, quote, we ought to choose life to protect life rather than destroy it. Well, where in the world is New York Knicks Enes Kanter? Fortunately for him, he's not in Turkey, which wants him in jail. We're going to tell you why. And officials in Australia say that horrific car ramming attack was not terrorism, but they're also admitting the suspect was angry about the treatment of Muslims like himself. Details on that ahead. And, quote, worse than Watergate? Ellison Barber is here with highlights from her exclusive conversation with Senator Rand Paul. Keep it right here. Several symphonies tonight are severing ties with famed conductor Charles Dutoit amid sexual misconduct allegations. 3 opera singers and a classical musician allege the world-renowned conductor assaulted them, physically restraining them and forcing unwanted kissing on them. The New York Philharmonic says Dutoit has withdrawn from concerts scheduled for next month. Both the San Francisco Symphony and the Boston Symphony Orchestra have cut ties with him as well. New tonight from the Las Vegas shooting investigation, the coroner just releasing its official determination that the shooter, Stephen Craig Paddock, killed himself by shooting himself in the head. Since the October 1st concert massacre in Las Vegas, the FBI has interviewed more than 400 people worldwide. But only the investigators know if we're any closer to figuring out the gunman's motive. Special Agent in Charge Aaron Rouse doing a rare interview, and Trace Gallagher has that. He joins us now live. Trace?
Shannon, the FBI says getting a report like this done in 1 year is, quote, light speed. But certainly for the victims and their families, it's an awfully long time to wait for answers. And when it comes to the ongoing and unanswered question of motive, why Stephen Paddock opened fire, killing 58, injuring more than 500 before turning the gun on himself, the FBI says it may never know. The special agent in charge of the investigation, Aaron Rouse, told the Las Vegas Review-Journal the FBI has interviewed more than 400 people worldwide who had some connection to Stephen Paddock. The feds are looking for information on everything from his history to his psychological and sociological makeup. The FBI has also brought in some 400 specialists to help catalog evidence. For example, the concert venue itself, where most of the victims were shot, took 14 days to document. It took another 13 days to document the gunman's hotel suite on the 32nd floor of the Mandalay Bay. On top of that, federal agents have followed 1,500 leads and collected 22,000 hours of videotape. So far, this is what the FBI can say for sure. Listen.
To this date, there is no affiliation. To this date, there is no ideology that's been attributed, and to this date there is no co-conspirators or other people that were involved with foreknowledge of this event. Does that mean we stop looking? No, I still have evidence being reviewed at the FBI laboratory, and as I mentioned, a lot of it.
He went on to say the goal of the investigation is to be 100% accurate, and that takes time. The FBI has not shed any light on the confusing and contradictory timeline. Like how long was it from when Stephen Paddock opened fire to when Mandalay Bay made the first call to police? And how long did it take police to respond to the hotel and make their way to the 32nd floor? Several news organizations have filed lawsuits trying to get the 911 tapes released. Shannon.
Thank you very much, Trace. Well, the U.S. plans to allow the sale of lethal weapons to Ukraine for use against pro-Russian separatists. Supporters say it's long overdue. Critics say it brings us closer to a real conflict with the Russians. Lucas Tomlinson has more tonight from the Pentagon.
The Trump administration ending the arms embargo on Ukraine, allowing them to buy 50 caliber sniper rifles and other light arms from U.S. companies. But the U.S. government will not be supplying the weapons. Still, the decision was applauded on Capitol Hill.
This president, at this time, with his national security team, is finally doing what people on both sides of the aisle have tried to get administrations to do. I mean, these weapons are to defend Ukraine against Russia's aggression.
Russia hawk Senator Tom Cotton turned it up a notch, quote, "This is a break from failed Obama-era policies to make Russia pay a cost for its aggression. With this decision, the Trump administration is reminding Vladimir Putin and his cronies that they lost the Cold War, and we won't tolerate their bullying of our friend Ukraine." But the State Department pushed back, saying weapons have been available for purchase before, after Russia annexed Crimea in 2014 and supported Kremlin-backed fighters in eastern Ukraine. Quote, "Under the previous two administrations, the U.S. government has approved export licenses to Ukraine, so this is nothing new." But a Green Beret and former Bush White House official says otherwise.
This is a significant break from the Obama administration. It is the largest sale that we've ever done. It is lethal, and it is going to send a message to the Russians, and they're not going to be happy about it.
As expected, the decision angered Moscow, officials calling the policy a dead end, which will only lead to more violence. Earlier this month, President Trump's national security advisor hinted changes were coming to the White House's handling of Russian aggression.
What we're continuing to do is strengthen Ukrainian defensive capabilities.
Ending the arms embargo comes at a time when the White House is pushing back on claims President Trump has been too soft on Russia. Ukraine's security service arrested an aide to the prime minister for being a Russian spy. More evidence things are heating up in Eastern Europe. Shannon?
Lucas Tomlinson at the Pentagon. All right, where in the world in 90 seconds? Turkey wants to imprison New York Knicks star Enes Kanter for insulting President Erdogan in a series of tweets. State prosecutors calling